Hello everyone, I'm your host Folabima Deleke, and today welcome to another episode of Genetics Unsealed. The idea of indigenous Europeans, biologically distinct, ancient and continuous, is one of the most persistent myths in modern identity politics. It sounds scientific, it borrows the language of genetics, and it is wrong. Today, we are going to dismantle that idea carefully, thoroughly, and without rhetoric, not by opinion, but by population genetics, archaeology, and ancient DNA. This is not a moral argument, it's an empirical one. When people say indigenous Europeans, they usually mean one of three things: a single ancient population that first occupied Europe, two, a biologically continuous lineage from prehistory to today, three, a genetic boundary separating Europeans from others. None of these exist. There has never been a single founding population, a stable ancestry genome, and a moment when Europe was biologically complete. Europe has always been a transit zone. Let's start with the idea of first Europeans. Even Mesolithic hunter gatherers, often imagined as Europe's original people, were not a single group. They were Western hunter gatherers, Eastern hunter gatherers, and Scandinavian hunter gatherers. These groups were genetically distinct from one another, and they themselves descending from populations that had repeatedly entered and left Europe during Ice Age cycles. There is no genetic line you can draw around them, and crucially, most of their ancestry does not dominate modern Europeans. Around 9,000 years ago, Europe undergoes a genetic rupture. Early farmers migrate from Anatolia and the Aegean. This is not cultural diffusion alone. Ancient DNA shows large-scale population movement. In many regions, hunter-gatherer ancestry drops sharply. Farmer ancestry becomes dominant. In southern Europe, modern populations are over 60% descended from these migrants. If indigenous Europeans means first inhabitants, then most Europeans are not descended from them in majority. Continuity breaks early. Then around 5,000 years ago, it happens again. Pastoralists from the Pontic Caspian steppe expand across Europe. In some regions, up to 90% of male lineages are replaced, and overall ancestry shifts by 30 to 60%. Modern Northern Europeans derive nearly half their ancestry from these migrants. So we now have at least three major population turnovers before the Iron Age. Which one is indigenous? Now, indigenous to what exactly? This is the key question. Indigenous to the landmass, a climate phase, or a cultural period. Europe itself is unstable. Coastlines changed, ice sheets advanced and retreated, the entire regions went uninhabitable. You cannot be indigenous to a moving target. Genetics does not recognize moral priority. Cultures are not genomes. Another common mistake is equating cultural continuity with biological continuity. Take the Celts. There is no Celtic gene, no Celtic ancestry component, and no genetic boundary matching Celtic culture. Celtic speaking populations were genetically mixtures of Neolithic farmers, steppe pastoralists, and local hunter gatherers. The same is true for Germanic groups, Italic groups, and Iberians. Language spreads faster than genes. Modern Europeans are not a baseline. Some argue that modern Europeans represent the default human. Genetically, this is incoherent. Modern Europeans are among the least genetically diverse populations globally, and they descend from repeated bottlenecks and carry ancestry from outside Europe. Africa contains far deeper human genetic history than all of Europe combined. If indigeneity were measured by time, depth, Europe would lose. The misuse of genetic percentages. You may hear claims like X% European DNA, pure ancestry, original bloodlines, but these misunderstand genetics. Percentages reflect statistical similarity, reference populations, and sampling choices. They do not represent biological essence, identity, and belonging. Genes do not carry passports. what genetics actually shows. Here's what the data actually supports. Europe was populated multiple times. Every population mixed with those before it. No group remained isolated. No genome remained stable. Modern Europeans are mosaics. There is no ancestral moment you can point to and say, this is the real Europe. The myth of indigenous Europeans persists because humans crave simple origins. Biology feels authoritative, and genetics is often misunderstood. Identity politics seeks legitimacy, but science does not exist to validate identity. It exists to describe reality. There were no indigenous Europeans in the way the term is commonly misused. There were waves of people, moments of dominance, periods of mixture, and constant movement. Europe was not inherited, it was assembled. If genetics teaches us anything, it is this: belonging is cultural, not biological. That's all for this episode of Genetics Unsealed. Until next time, peace. Your host, Felipe Deleke, signing out.